It gives me great pleasure, delegates, to introduce to you somebody that I'm sure you all know well as a local representative in the Victorian Parliament, but hailing from Canberra, where I work very closely with our ACT government as the Deputy Chair of our Chief Minister's LGBTIQ Advisory Council and a member of our Disability Reference Group. Before I introduce our first guest, I undertook some research, and Gabrielle Williams MP had decided at the age of 15 that she would like to be a politician. Now, I don't know about you, but as somebody who now works to guide and craft the careers of many people with disability, at age 15, I myself was still learning all the moves to Madonna's Vogue, and I wasn't yet crafting my political career. But indeed, delegates, Gabrielle Williams MP was, and we are delighted to have Gabrielle with us today. Gabrielle is a representative of the Victorian Government, Parliamentary Secretary for Health and Parliamentary Secretary for Carers and Volunteers. So I would like to welcome Gabrielle to the stage. Thank you.
Now's the time to assess the state you're in.
Thank you very much, Wayne, for that hilarious and very warm introduction. I still don't know all the moves to Vogue, so perhaps we can compare notes one day and you can teach me that, and I'll teach you everything you might never want to know about the Victorian Parliament. But look, I'm delighted to be here with you all today, and I want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Wurundjeri people, and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present, and any other elders we may have here with us today. And how fortunate we were to hear from Perry Wandin and hear the story of his family and the impact on the Aboriginal community of settlement in Australia. And it's always, I think, a wonderful thing to be reminded of that. I also want to acknowledge a few special guests, and I do this reluctantly because I know I'll usually forget somebody. So I am going to complete it with a bit of a catch-all, but I know we have here with us today, and hopefully they're here with us now, Colleen Furlanetto, the Chairperson of the Victorian Disability Advisory Council, David Hayward, the Director of the VCOS RMIT Future Social Services Institute, Melanie Muir, President of Disability Advocacy Victoria, Professor Anne Kavanagh, Academic Director of Melbourne Disability Institute. And I also want to pay a special tribute, if you like, or acknowledgement to all the disability advocates and self-advocates that are here with us today, and to those of you who may have travelled from outside of Melbourne to be here, with a special hug to those coming from Canberra, because I know that can be quite traumatic. And of course to our organisers, and I know so much work goes into putting together a conference like this, and they deserve to be acknowledged and to have their hard work recognised. And finally, I'll also acknowledge the volunteers that are helping out today as well, because it's such a great thing to be able to give of your time for an event or a cause that means a lot to you. So thank you for that as well. Disability advocates in Victoria have a long and proud history of working across the wider community to ensure the rights of people with a disability are upheld, and also to ensure that those rights are promoted. And our advocates are also well known and highly respected as great innovators for your ability to think outside the square, which is, of course, why the theme of this year's conference is so apt. Doing disability differently, I think, perfectly encapsulates the great reformist spirit and the aspiration of all of us to build a truly inclusive Victoria. And as you know, inclusion is at the heart of our Absolutely Everyone State Disability Plan, which encapsulates the years 2017 to 2020. And disability advocacy is one of the key priorities that's outlined within that plan. And the Victorian Government is developing the Victorian Disability Advocacy Futures Plan to help disability advocacy grow and get stronger into the future. Now, this includes making Victoria's disability advocacy sector more sustainable and responsive to the community's call for better access to advocacy. Though Minister Foley isn't here with us today, he has recognised from the very beginning of his term and in his role that a strong advocacy sector is what makes the promise of greater choice and control for people with disability possible. We know that's absolutely at the heart of concepts of choice and control. And that's why the Andrews Labor government has backed the plan with funding of $4.3 million over 2 years to expand advocacy to a further 300 people with disability. And that's on top of the annual ongoing funding of $3 million that we provide to 24 organisations across the state. So Advocacy Futures will give us a framework for how we use this additional funding, but we know that that for this plan to be successful, people with disability and their advocates need to guide us every step of the way, and we know that you're exceptionally good at doing that and the best resource that any government could have in this space. The government has now released the discussion paper to seek your feedback and ideas, and I strongly urge you to give those ideas. And copies of the discussion paper are now available. I understand that they may be even available here today in hard copy or via our State Disability Plan website, and I really do encourage you all to have a read of that paper and submit your ideas. Be frank and fearless. We always welcome your feedback. The Andrews Labor government is also committed to delivering advocacy in new ways to address gaps in our system, from providing better support to parents to LGBTI people and culturally diverse people with a disability. Also through to growing our future generations of advocates and finding new ways to collaborate and connect. 15 new initiatives are being delivered through the Victorian Government's $1.57 million sector capacity building fund. This includes an expansion of disability advocacy resource units' online disability advocacy induction training program. Try and get that out quickly. And I know that this is being discussed later today. Now, the new content will focus on inclusive education, providing you with the tools you need to support students with a disability to get the best possible outcomes. It will also include dedicated information to deliver best practice in advocacy, which will be fundamental to the success of that Advocacy Futures plan. Now, all of us have the right to live lives free from violence and abuse. But tragically, this has not always been the case for people living with a disability. Now, the parliamentary inquiry into abuse and disability services shone a light on systemic weaknesses and failures of existing safeguards in disability services. And I know many of you here will be well aware of those challenges, and some of you may have even been personally touched by them. Now, the Victorian Government acted quickly in terms of the recommendations of that inquiry and has strengthened safeguards to prevent abuse into the future. This includes formalising the principle of zero tolerance of abuse of people with disability and also strengthening the powers of the Disability Services Commissioner. We've also implemented the Disability Abuse Prevention Strategy, and this strategy includes Victoria's first ever Code of Conduct for disability workers and the expansion of the Disability Worker Exclusion Scheme. In addition to this, Victoria has passed legislation to establish an independent registration and accreditation scheme for the disability workforce to help us to retain and attract disability support workers with the right skills, with the right experience and with the right qualifications. And we're also advocating for a robust national quality and safeguards framework that maintains and further strengthens protections for people using disability services right across our country. Now, the work I've outlined today, from strengthening and expanding advocacy to the protection of basic human rights in communities and in workplaces across Victoria, is really the foundation upon which a fair and inclusive society is built, and we all know that. However, this work needs to be supported by opportunities for people with a disability to contribute to the social, the civic, the economic lives of our community. Our Every Opportunity Economic Participation Plan for people with a disability, which was launched earlier this year, will drive better outcomes for people with a disability across a number of areas, including education, employment, and business ownership and innovation. And crucially, it also aims to shift community attitudes and challenge stereotypes about people with disability, which I know will probably feature in many of your discussions today. Every opportunity will complement the NDIS, which, if it's implemented as it was originally envisaged, will be a huge catalyst of positive change for people in disability in Victoria, albeit with some challenges in transition that I think it's only fair to acknowledge. The Victorian Government is also supporting a range of advocacy initiatives to create positive change, such as Daru's recently launched Empowered Lives, a platform for demanding changes for Victorians with a disability. The platform will provide us with valuable information about barriers to meaningful participation in our society, information based on the lived experience of people with disability and also of their advocates. And for our part, we know that there must be a strong and effective partnership between the Victorian and the Commonwealth governments and the NDIA to ensure that we get the NDIS right, and we're working as hard as we can to make that happen. As part of this, Victorian Labor is committed to maintaining and strengthening a strong and robust disability advocacy sector during and after transition to the NDIS. We know that's crucial to ensuring its success long into the future. So as Samantha Power, the former US Ambassador to the United Nations, said, and I'll quote, "All advocacy is, at its core, an exercise in empathy." And it is this empathy, this understanding, that is critical to preventing abuse and to upholding the rights of people with a disability. And it's really critical to getting a significant making significant steps forward in the way we support advocacy in our community. On behalf of the Andrews Labor Government, I want to thank the disability advocates and the self-advocates that are here today for the work you do in helping build a more inclusive society, and the many organisations that are critical to this space. I also implore you all to keep doing disability differently, because it's your creativity, your innovative zeal that will help make Victoria's disability advocacy sector more sustainable, and it will help ensure that people with a disability have access to advocacy when and where they need it and in the way they need it. I really want to thank you all for making the time to be here and be a part of such an important discussion in our community, and for all that you do to help bring government with you, to help inform government and demand that it be responsive to your needs, because that's exactly what you should be doing. So thank you for having me here with you today.
Thank you for your address, Gabrielle, very much appreciated. And certainly from my perspective, of someone who doesn't live in Victoria, it's certainly great to hear of all the work that the Andrews Labor Government are doing to ensure that people with disability, and including our advocacy sector, are supported, and that we recognise that inclusion doesn't happen in silos. It takes everybody, and it's important that we have strong government support. So thank you for outlining all of the work that the Andrews Labor Government is doing